The Talksport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the Talksport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search Talksport Fan Network.
Welcome back to Cherry Picking, all Cherries fans, and thank you for joining us. Now, of course, hit the like, subscribe, and the bell button below. It helps the channel to grow. Now, it wouldn't be Cherry Picking if the main man wasn't sat next to me, Mr. Matthew Harrison. How you doing, Matt?
Yeah, all good, Craig. Yep. Looking forward to this one. So, yeah, be good.
Excellent stuff. And we do have a very, very special guest for this very, very special show. It is no other than journalist Graham Nickless. How are you doing, Graham?
Good evening. I'm absolutely fine. Thank you. How are you?
Yes, all good. All good. And thank you so much for joining us. What we'll do is let's start off with Guest the Cherry. We're going to discuss a little bit about your journalism background and supporting where your love for football come in. But let's do Guest the Cherry first. And here we go. So our cherry this week was born in Newcastle-under-Lyme in 1945. He played under the great Stanley Matthews at Port Vale, but supported Stoke City. Probably made him popular, made his name at Gillingham, signed for the Cherries in 1970 and went on to play 126 times, scoring 8 times. Known to have turned down Spurs to play for John Bond at Norwich, conceded a penalty in the 1975 League Cup final by handling the ball, and as manager of Manchester City, he gave Man United a hammer by overseeing a 5-1 victory. Who is he? Comments in the description below, and we will reveal all at the end of this show. So, Graham, like I say, an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Let's firstly talk about your love for football. And where did it originate from?
1966 World Cup final. I was sitting there watching it on a black and white television with my dad in Winkfield, Berkshire. And, you know, when you've won the World Cup, you think the world, England, are the top team in the world and it will remain so. Let's not forget, we've not got anywhere near it since. Okay, semi-finals and whatever, but we've got anywhere near it since. So I was sitting there watching that. Fantastic. My love for football really started from there. And then I started watching on television with my dad. And then I went to Reading. Reading's my local club at the time. I went to Elm Park when I was about a teenager, 13 years of age, which is a long time ago. And it really started from there. And I was playing football locally. And I have this love for football for well, you know, many years. And I've been a journalist for 51 years now. And you know, football's not been the only sport in my life, because as a journalist, I've covered Formula One, snooker, cricket, open golf, tennis, and everything. But overall, football has been the love of my life.
of course, you are no. You will know a lot about clubs that have been in trouble. Of course, Reading have been in trouble in the past, and unfortunately are at the moment. Of course,
Yeah.
AFC Bournemouth have been several times when you've been covering the club as well. Let's take it back to the first time when Reading were in having issues under Robert Maxwell. And of course, there was that story with regards to the merging with Oxford United at the time. What was
I,
that period like?
well, at that time, I probably wasn't involved with the club as a fan. I was a journalist then, so I was
Mhm.
probably taken away from the club as I have been. However, on the day it was announced, Robert Maxwell announced that he was going to merge the clubs. I was at Tottenham Hotspur, probably covering their game for the Daily Star at that time. And I was outside the stadium when Roger Smee, former player, came down the steps and he was on the board at Reading. And I said to him, Roger, have you heard the news? So I informed him of the news of Robert Maxwell, and he was incredulous and said, no, that can't happen. We can't have Thames Valley Royals. And I know he went straight back to Reading. He got together a bunch of journalists, a bunch of people close to the club, including a good friend of mine called Roger Ware, who I still see monthly. And they formulated a group of people to fight Robert Maxwell. And in the end, they won and they stopped the merger. And I played a very small part in letting Roger Smee know that. But it was very important for Reading. And at that time, Maxwell thought he ruled the world. He was obviously the chief at Mirror Group newspapers. He was a man that felt he could get away with anything. But I do remember going to Oxford's ground at the Manor Road, I think it was then, and I doorstepped him and stopped him driving out the car park to get him to wind his window down, and I got him to talk about why he was trying to merge two clubs. So I played a very, very, very small part in it, but Roger Smee and his friends around him stopped that merger, which was very important because we still got Reading FC today.
Yeah, most definitely. And of course, you've been a Reading fan for years, of course, as well as being a journalist. And I know that we was discussing John Medeski as well, somebody who is thought of heavily or favourably by a lot of Reading fans. But what was your experiences with John?
Excuse me. Let me just say, I've got the utmost respect for John because he put his money in and he helped build the club. He helped build the new stadium. And I've got a lot of respect for him for what he did. However, he should never have called it the Medeski Stadium. I know it's not that now, but he should never have done it because he had no influence on the club apart from saving them. He wasn't involved with the club for years and years and years. Yes, name a stand after him, name a road after him, but to call it the Medeski Stadium, I was very unhappy with. So I wrote him a letter saying that my dad had stood on the terraces at Elm Park in 1933 or something like that, at the record crowd of 34,000, and said, look, I'm a Reading fan, my family's a Reading fan, you can't call it Medeski Stadium. Why don't you call it something like the Princess Stadium? Because we just lost Lady Di. It's the only club in Berkshire, and I suggested that. Anyway, he called me to a meeting. I went to a meeting with him and his two clowns who were alongside him. And we had a little discussion about why it shouldn't be Medeski Stadium. And I had a bit of an argument with all three of them. He then stormed out the meeting and said, I might as well just sell the club, etc., etc. The two clowns had a go at me, and I said, no, I'm a Reading fan. He should have offered the name of the stadium to the fans, and he should have given them that chance. So although we fell out then, I have spoken to John since. I still believe he's done a great job for the club. But then he sold out to, I'm trying to think now, was it a Russian or whatever?
Zingarevich, wasn't it? Anton
and
Zingarevich.
It's been a big problem for the club ever since.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, you would have been covering as well AFC Bournemouth when we was having issues. Of course, we've had the Winter Gardens, and of course, 2008, when the club, let's be honest, were very, very close to going under, minus 17 points. Well, second from bottom in League Two at the time, because of course, only because Luton had been given a 30-point deduction, which was a little bit ridiculous on their behalf as well. But with regards to that period, what was your firstly? Could you see AFC Bournemouth surviving at that point?
In a way, yes, because not many people remember that Jimmy Quinn was the manager. And Jimmy Quinn was actually a friend of mine. I played golf with him, and I'd known him for a few years because he was joint manager of Reading when they went to the Championship playoff final. I think, was it Bolton or was it Hull? I'm trying to think.
Bolton Wanderers.
They lost 4-2. They were 2-0 up and missed a penalty or something. Lost 4-3, and yeah. So I knew Jimmy. The fact he was at the club at Bournemouth here was great because I knew I had a friend there, and I thought I had a real in with him. I liked him. He played a different style that Bournemouth wanted, a more long ball style. They didn't like that, but what he had done, he had negated. He'd beaten the record. What was it? Craig? What minus? Was it
minus 17?
17. Yeah. I think. By the time he got to Christmas, I think they'd just about come through that and were plus. And then, of course, he got fired on New Year's Eve and Eddie Howe came in. So I was a bit upset for Jimmy, the way it happened. I had no idea of Eddie Howe at the time. Didn't know much about him because he didn't play that much for the club. And I don't think I interviewed him that often. So I did feel sorry for Jimmy, and as if he's been wiped out of the history of the club. However, Eddie Howe came in and the miracle happened.
Yeah, most definitely did. Most definitely did. Well, the miracle is kind of still going, and we'll come back to your thoughts on Eddie and, of course, Andoni as well. But let's have a little look at this Premier League table and ask the question, how do AFC Bournemouth unlock European qualification? So let's bring that up. So this is the Premier League table as of the 23rd of January. And we are, to be honest, I have to pinch myself at this. And to be fair, a couple of weeks ago, it was even better. We're 7th in the top flight of English football. Now, with that table as it looks at the moment, Graham, you know, of course, you've got the Liverpools, you've got the Arsenals, Chelsea, Man City. But there's a real shout because Man City have been performing poorly, haven't they, really, this season? They've gone through that rough spell. Maybe they've picked up a little bit recently. Chelsea aren't setting the world alight. There's a real chance, do you feel, that Bournemouth are going to get some sort of European football?
Well, I've got to agree with you. If you'd said to me at the start of the season, Bournemouth could be going for European football, even Champions League football, I would have said you were joking. Are you talking about the Eurovision Song Contest or something like that? I wouldn't have believed it. But the way they're playing, I mean, the result at Newcastle against Eddie Howe's team was sensational. I couldn't believe it. And when I saw it on Match of the Day and saw how much they dominated the game, now I've seen so much of Bournemouth, the way they played. You know, obviously at Vitality Stadium, I've seen them beat Man City. I've seen them they stopped Man City's unbeaten run of the season. They stopped Arsenal's unbeaten run of the season. They beat Tottenham. They've gone away to Man United, won 3-0. And then I thought, well, hold on, this is Newcastle. Now, Eddie Howe, who I've got to say is a good friend of mine. He's in my book, which you've not mentioned yet. Cheers to 50 years on the Sporting Frontline. He's in my book, talking about England, talking about Bournemouth, talking about Newcastle and his relationship with me. Now, I know Eddie would have been totally primed up for that match, having not beaten Bournemouth in the league. And yet Bournemouth totally manipulated the game, totally dominated them. And even I, having seen it on Match of Day, was staggered because we know Bournemouth have got very few first teamers on the bench, if any. They've got so many injuries, and yet this team are playing for themselves, and they're playing for the team, and they're playing this high-profile press game that is somehow dominating the opposition. And to be honest, I look at that table and I say to myself, why not? Because let's face it, in Europe at the moment, the British clubs are top of this league table for performances. And if we carry on that way, we'll have 5 teams going into Champions League. So why can't Bournemouth be in that top 5? And beyond that, then it's the Europa League or whatever it's called. So nothing is telling me at the moment Bournemouth can't do it, because the way, and I am a very hard-nosed journalist, and I look at everything in power, and I think to myself, why do they fear anyone? They don't need to fear anyone. They've beaten most of the top teams apart from probably Liverpool, and they've got them in a couple of weeks. So why can't they do it? And I have to say to myself, if they continue with this spirit, this incredible team spirit they've got, and they're all banking in on the system, then why not?
No, fair enough. Fair enough. What's been your highlight so far of the season, Matt? Because it'd be quite good to just remember some of the key points of the season so far, and whether or not there's a number of teams which we can only dream of doing the double over, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's been loads of memories, isn't there? And I mean, only halfway through the season as well, aren't we? I mean, looking back over the season so far, the Man City win's a massive one.
Yeah.
Beating Arsenal at home, beating Spurs, hammering United away again. Result against Newcastle, like Graham's just said, the way we played on Saturday was, phenomenal. The way we kept, Eddie's midfield, who their midfield three, I quite admire that they're pressing and how they win the ball and how we managed to keep them quiet and their whole team quiet. I mean, Isaac as well, how Houston and Sabanier did a fantastic job against Isaac on Saturday. There's been so many good points and memories this season. For me at the minute, it's hard just to profile in on one specific moment. Yeah, like Graham was just saying, why not? I mean, why can't Bournemouth achieve a European place? Like you said, with the potential extra Champions League place coming into play as well. There's, and where we are at the minute, we are in the mix for it. I'm trying though, from a fan's perspective. I know some fans are out there, really like yourself. You've put a video out this week about how the European tour is coming and is happening. I'm kind of keeping my feet on the ground and enjoying it game by game, because we're watching some of the best football we've ever watched. I mean, Iriola's high pressing play is second to none. So I'm enjoying it game by game. I'm not going to get carried away at the minute, because I'm just enjoying it game by game, and I don't want to get too carried away and then be disappointed. So I'm enjoying it, but there's absolutely no reason why we can't achieve it. And to be honest with you, I mean, what a season so far. It's been magnificent.
Yeah, definitely. You're the sensible one of the two of us, aren't you?
Yeah, I just like to keep my feet on the ground. I mean, I just like to, enjoy. I'm enjoying the moment. I'm loving seeing the table every week when we're this high, and my heart is saying, we can do it, but my head's just saying keep your feet on the ground for the minute. So
Yeah. Whilst I've already got my plane tickets probably to Bayern Munich next year. yeah, I need to learn a thing or two from you, Matt.
The problem that we have got is obviously the run of games here.
Yes, and of course, there is the run of fixtures that are going to lead up to the end of the season. And of course, there's some tough games in there, some big games. Of course, there is a trip to the Etihad in there as well, right at the very end. Graham, from having a look at the fixture list,
I
you
am.
know, and what we've got remaining, where would you say is games where we should be saying, right, these we have to win these by, without any doubt. But where are the potential banana skins in here as well? Because there's quite a few as well, which you could say that could be tricky, or towards the end of the season, we don't really want to play them.
Craig, that is a fan talking to me.
Yes.
I'm not a fan. I'm a journalist. I'm not a Bournemouth fan. I'm a journalist. So all I can judge things on is how the team are playing. Now, they need injuries back. They need to get Tavernier and co back. They need more numbers, because I cannot believe that they can continue doing this with the numbers they've got on the bench.
Yeah.
They're using youngsters, and so far it's working. Fantastic. I'm so pleased for them. But eventually they're going to get tired. They're going to get worn down. And eventually someone will suss out the club and the way they're playing, and it will change. However, when you've beaten the Man Cities, the Tottenhams, the Man Uniteds, the Newcastle like that, why fear anybody? We talked about Nottingham Forest coming next. Someone said to me today, Nottingham Forest, oh my God. I said, what are you on about? If you can go and beat Newcastle like they did away, why worry? If you can go and beat Man United 3-0 away, why worry? These teams have got to come to Bournemouth. It's a little difficult ground because they're right on top of you. The crowd gets behind the team, and why not? Why fear anyone? It's a no fear situation, because the manager, and I talk to him every week, I'll be talking to him tomorrow, is so down to earth. He doesn't get carried away. He always says, no, we've got to be at our best. We've got to be our most lethal. We've got to be high press. We've got to press them. He doesn't expect anything. He says, well, if we lose, I'm sure his feeling is we shouldn't be beating these teams, really. But deep down, I like to know exactly what he's feeling, but he doesn't tell me, because he knows I ask the awkward questions. So he's a bit wary of me, but in a nice way. But why should he fear anyone? Why should Bournemouth fans fear anyone? Jesus, looking at it, okay, you go to Manchester City, one game away, Etihad, that's second bottom match, that's the second from last game. Who gives a damn? They can beat any of those teams now. And this is somebody who would never have said that at the start of the season, because especially when Iraola arrived at the club, he didn't win a league game for 9 games. I saw his pre-season stuff. I looked at it and thought, well, where's this guy coming in? Where's this guy? What's he doing? And then I saw his league stuff, and I thought, well, they can't play to his system. And I'm thinking, well, how's this going to work? And to you what, one of several pivotal moments happened when Newcastle, Eddie Howe again, went to the Vitality Stadium last season, and I'm lucky because Eddie agreed to do a photo with me with a shirt that had Nico 50 on it, because he was happy to do something for my book, and that's on the front cover of the book. And luckily I got him to sign it beforehand, because after the game his team had been outplayed by Bournemouth, and Bournemouth should have won it, but a Kotara goal was disallowed in the last few moments, which shouldn't have been, and they should have lost that game, but they drew. But from that moment the team played to their Spanish gaffer's system, and from that moment they have now produced this wonderful football. And if you don't mind me saying, more pivotal moments, Semenyo. Semenyo's come of age this season, and maybe a bit last season, but he's come of age. And although I was very, how can I put it? I was very not happy with the way the midfielders were providing goals last season and the start of this season. But Semenyo suddenly produced these performances from the wing that upset teams. He seemed to upset the whole dynamics of the game. And he came inside, and he uses his left foot, right foot. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at a player and go, do you know what? You're going to make a difference. And I felt him coming of age, he's like a beast. He calls himself a dog because he likes snapping at heels. I think him coming of age has just given Bournemouth this dynamic. And all of a sudden, you've got these midfielders suddenly turning up, scoring goals more than they should have done. Christie needs to score more. Cook needs to score more. But suddenly Kluivert. And when Kluivert arrived, he was so out of pace of the Premier League. I looked at him and thought, well, you can't cross the ball. You can't do anything. You're not making an impact on the game. All of a sudden now, he's one of the stars of the season. He's got 2 hat-tricks, and it's fantastic. But they're all buying in to Iraola's system, and it's working.
It's actually a very, very, very interesting point you've made there with regards to the start of last season, because I'll hold my hands up here. I completely agreed with you. You know, it wasn't that I knew about Iraola beforehand. I knew what he had done at Vallecano, and I knew that it worked in Spain. However, hands up, I turned around and I said to Matt, I said, I don't think it's going to work. And it was especially after that 3-0 defeat against Everton at Goodison Park.
Yes.
I said, it's not going to work. I said, we haven't got the personnel. We haven't got the players. Iraola's a good manager. You can see that. But, you know, sometimes you have to adapt, and Iraola doesn't really want to adapt. But what do you feel has been, and I'll ask Matt, you give me your thoughts, and then Graham, it'll be great to get your thoughts as well. What do you think has been the difference? Because it's been from that Burnley win, it's just improved and improved and improved and improved to this point where we're talking about Bournemouth potentially getting into Europe and in touching distance of Champions League at this point in time. What do you reckon, Matt?
Well, I'll just give you a very quick view on it from a fan's perspective. But with what you were saying last year during those 9 games, which I, at the time, totally disagreed with you. As I said, at the time, it just needed something to click. And as soon as it clicks, they're going to be playing great football and we're going to be getting results. And something clicked just at the right time, in my opinion. And I had faith in Iraola from when he came in. There was just something about his style and the football we were seeing. Okay, it wasn't perfect, but what he was trying to implement looked like it was going to become, very good, and it has done. But I'd be more interested in Graham's opinion really on this than mine.
Yeah, go for it, Graham.
Well, as you say, it clicked, and it clicked against the Newcastle game. Poor old Eddie hasn't beaten Bournemouth in the league since he left or joined Newcastle. But that clicked in that game. And I was looking at my fellow colleagues in the media room saying, what happened tonight? What happened tonight? And we're all saying, we don't know. All of a sudden, the whole team must have got his tactics, must have realised what they were doing, threw themselves into it, and it just worked perfectly. And I don't think they've looked back since then. I think that was pivotal. I think that match was pivotal. Let's face it, Eddie should have lost both games this season, as I said earlier. But no, it's just incredible that it should happen against Eddie Howe's Newcastle. But the thing is, players like to be instructed. I didn't think Bournemouth had the players to probably play to his system. But as it's turned out, he has. Now, how unbelievably great was it that they got 65,000 for Solanke? Solanke has never, in my mind, been a top-class Premier League footballer. Yes, he scored goals in the Championship. Then he had a bad year, I think, in the Premier League. And then he had a good year, a lot of them penalties. But to go and get 60, 65,000 from Tottenham was unbelievable. And of course, he brings in new players, and it's worked pretty well when you think about who he's brought in. And I just say to myself, well, Eva Nilsson, he hasn't scored as many goals, but the quality goals he's got is sensational. Unfortunately, he's out for a while. But you've got to also look that now I was very critical also of Bournemouth signings. There's been a lot of signings, and I used to joke in the press room and say, do you know what? They've brought another 5'8" midfielder who can beat the odd man but can't hit a barn door. And they're all the same. There's so many sort of wingers, midfielders, 5'8", and sort of can't hit a barn door, can't score many goals, and Solanke needed help and everything. Then, as I said, Semenyo came in and started scoring, which helped out a great deal. But at least they had a front man, Eva Nilsson, after selling Solanke. And it just worked. And all of a sudden, no, not all of a sudden, it happened against Newcastle, but all of a sudden, the players are believing and playing into his system. And this manager is very modest. He doesn't take any credit what's going on. He gives all credit to the players. And I have to say, they are playing to his strengths. They're playing to his system. And the teams that are facing Bournemouth haven't accepted what they're facing, and they're getting beaten for it. Let's face it, the young boy, Huyson, that's coming in defence, what is it, 19 years of age. He is so mature. He's incredible. When he scored that header against Tottenham didn't pick him up because they didn't realise who is this guy and what can he do. Well, was it Juventus he was playing for? He was scoring. Yes. He was scoring goals over there, and then suddenly he's left all his defenders, gone to the back post and headed in. And that's pure naivety from Spurs for not realising what he was up to. And he's been a wonderful signing. And I've got to say, obviously Kirke's been wonderful, Kluivert's been wonderful, and they're all playing to the system and they're working. And good luck to the team.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the recruitment, as you mentioned there as well, has been first class, and it still looks to be going in that direction. I spoke to Alejo Rivera, who is effectively the Clive Tilsey, Martin Tyler of Argentinian football, about Julio Soler. That's how you say it, Julio Soler. But yeah, that again looks a great piece of business. And Alejo, I don't know if this is going to come to fruition, reckons that he could be a better player than Kirkes. Now, what does that make him, So, yeah, I'd like to see that. But we shall see.
I just think very quickly, before we move on to the next segment, I think what Graham said about the injuries we've got is going to be very key, how well we do with these fixtures coming up. Because, I don't know if you saw James Maddison's interview the other day, but he was moaning that Spurs have got 11 players out, and Bournemouth got 11 players out and still managing to grind the results. But long term going forward, and Graham's right, how long can this patched up side with the youngsters on the bench carry on performing as they are? So the quicker we get some of the injuries back, the better, and hopefully gives Areola more options, but hopefully will help make these games a bit easier. But I do think that is key long term as well.
But also key, lads, is the fact if you get into Europe, and I hope they do, whatever it is, Champions League, Europa League, or whatever, they are going to have lack of players. They are going to have a huge squad. Every club that virtually gets into Europe, certainly the West Hams or the Aston Villas and whatever, they need extra players. You need all those players to play all these games. And Bournemouth do not have a big squad. Bournemouth do not have a squad to cope with Europe. So if they get there, Bill Foley is going to have to be ambitious, and he's going to have to pay for the players to come in. However, the big thing against Bournemouth, and some people don't realise this and even think about it, is that you've got to have the fair play situation comes into account. Yeah. Because Bournemouth do not earn that much money from probably marketing and certainly not from their 11,200 crowds, they are at a disadvantage. They can't go and spend 100 million, 200 million, and whatever on players that other clubs can, because they don't earn that. So that goes against them. I remember Bill Foley last summer saying to me, it was talking to me about Solanke maybe moving, but he was talking about the fair play, that we cannot probably buy so many players. And people forget this, because Bournemouth is such a small club, the smallest in the Premier League, and probably their income is the smallest. You can't go out and buy all these players. So it's a double-edged sword. If you get into Europe, you're going to face consequences.
Yeah, definitely. And we will come on to, the players that, or, what we can do if we do get the European place. But I tell you what, let's go through to the next part, next segment, Matt. And this is what Lewis Cook said. So I'll just read through this and then I'll get your thoughts on it as well, Graham, and also Matt's as well. So Captain Cook, like his boss, and this from Daily Echo, I should say as well, Andoni Iraola, played down any discussions of potential European football, saying his first target is to just improve on their points tally from last term. But the Englishman said football is about dreaming, and he wants the Cherries faithful to dream big for the Dorset side this season, and said their support of the side has been special so far this term. Cook said, I'm a bit different to quite a few people, but obviously I like the fans to dream, and why not get excited? For me, it's just to progress from last year and to beat that points tally, and then, see where it goes. We've had seasons before where we had less points than last year, and we finished higher. So you never know what the league's going to be like. But to get up there, you've got to have a really good season. The Cherries currently sit within touching distance of the Champions League spots, let alone the Europa League or the Conference League positions. But it is a congested part of the table, with Bournemouth deservedly there at the moment, thanks to a 10-game unbeaten run in the league. Asked about potential European qualification, Cook said, I don't mention Europe ever, but I'm just going to take it game by game, and you never know. But like I say, I want the fans to dream. That's what football is all about. Get excited and keep supporting us, because that's what they did today. They travelled so far today. I saw the bus times to travel here. Of course, 12 o'clock from Weymouth. I think it was 2:30 from Dean Court, or 2 o'clock, maybe even earlier. And they were ridiculous. 12:30. The first pickup to get here, I think that was from Dean Court. So yeah, probably pushed it back a little bit myself. It's incredible that it was full up there, and that means a lot to us, because that's special. The result, special, but that's even more special. So that's what Lewis Cook has said. And we have got that right to dream. The players are taking it game by game, a lot of them. But, should the players be going, right, okay, we're on to something good here? Because relegation is out of the equation. Would you agree, Graham?
Well, it will be when I ask Andoni tomorrow, are you free of relegation? That's my first question to him. And that'll give him a laugh. I'll give everyone a laugh in the press room.
Yeah.
No, listen, I don't pay for tickets. I don't pay to watch football, because that's my job. You fans pay every week. You pay a lot of good money, hard-earned money, to watch your team. Of course, you've got to dream. Of course, you are in, well, you're in la la land at the moment, because you're seventh in the table. You're the smallest club in the Premier League. You're beating all the big wigs. You've got every right to dream, and you must dream, because those players cannot come out and say we're going to reach Europe, because like their manager, they're very modest. They can't say it. They might feel it. They're never going to say it in writing, but they're going out there each week. They must look at their squad and go, look at the youngsters on the bench. Jesus Christ, we all know playing football, your top scorer's missing, or someone big in the team's missing. You all have this negativity filled. But this team is going out there and going, we're going to give it our best. So, yes, dream. Players, dream. They might not say it, but dream. fans, please dream. You're paying your money. That's what you deserve. That's what you deserve for paying your money. You deserve to be dreaming that it could happen. And the beauty of our English system is that we've got the pyramid system, and we've seen so many clubs over the years. I've commentated on Yeovil coming up from the non-league and getting into the championship. That was as far as they go. They had what, 7,000 crowds, and then they went back down. But that was wonderful. I've seen Bournemouth come up. I've reported on Wimbledon, the crazy gang, lower divisions coming up into the top flight and winning the FA Cup. That's what dreams are about. And that's what we need in football. And all these European bigwigs saying they want a super European league, will go and bugger off. We don't need that. We want the system we've got now. And this system is fantastic. It's the best system in the world. The championship is what, the fourth supported division in the whole of the world. That's how big our crowds are. And it's history. We've got the best system, best system in the world. And the fact is, we can all dream. And please, Bournemouth fans, just carry on dreaming.
Yeah.
How important is it, Matt, though? And, of course, I'm dreaming, you're a bit more grounded, but,
Dreaming,
and
but I'm grounded, yeah.
yeah, but, Andoni, of course, looking at it from the other foot, is probably going to be, of course, instilling that one game at a time mentality into them, because if we don't achieve that, yeah, we're going to be gutted. But, for a player's career, a player's ambitions, they want to be playing at the very, very top. We thought that this was the very, very top. The Premier League, getting into the Premier League was, well, I would have called you crazy back in 2008, I've got to be honest. But, how, important is it that he keeps the players grounded just in case we don't achieve it, so we can restart afresh, have another go next season?
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, as a manager, he's got to do that, hasn't he?
Mhm.
He's got to keep the players grounded because he wants to get the best out of the players every week. But yeah, it's going to be a difficult one, isn't it? If we don't, obviously, for me, my biggest fear on not achieving a European place this year is when the vultures that are circling around the squad now start to maybe try and pick the squad apart, because obviously players will have individual ambitions, which we'll discuss a little bit further on. But yeah, it's that's his job though, Craig, isn't it? He's got to keep those players grounded, and he's got to get the best out of the players every week. So it's no good, the manager getting too excited, because it's not how managers work, is it? He's got to keep them grounded and himself grounded, and concentrate on the training pitch and on the matches, isn't he? But yeah, it's from what Cook said in his in that bit in the press there, it's sounds a bit like me, really. But yeah, they wanting the fans to dream, which we all are, and they're just concentrating on it game by game. So you can't expect a captain. Well, he's captain at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, of course.
So he's leading the squad every week. So you can't expect your captain to say anything else than that, really.
No, exactly. Well, I tell you what, let's have a little look at how Bournemouth can qualify for Europe. And I've been doing all sorts of calculations about this. Matt's done all the presentation. He's the technical one here. I'm merely the presenter. But I tell you what, let's go through this breakdown. So, UEFA Champions League qualification. So, as everybody knows, 4 UEFA Champions League places are automatically given to English clubs who fulfill the following criteria. So the top 4 teams in the Premier League qualify for the league phase. Now, of course, there could be a 5th team, but hold that thought for a moment. The UEFA Europa League. So 2 places are given to English clubs who fulfill the following criteria. So the 5th place team in the Premier League qualify for the league phase, or the 6th place team if the top 5 clubs qualify for the UEFA Champions League. And also the winners of the FA Cup qualify for the league phase. But of course, if they finish in the top 4, that's where another stipulation comes in. Again, hold that thought. It all gets very, very complex, this. And the UEFA Conference League qualification, the EFL Cup winners qualify for the playoff stages. Again, unless they're in the Europa League via league, or if they win the FA Cup as well as the Carabao Cup, or they're in the Champions League. Now, here we go, where these qualifications change and how it can help Bournemouth. So if the FA Cup winners finish in the top 5 of the Premier League, their UEFA Europa League phase place will go to the next highest team not qualified for UEFA competitions in the Premier League. So effectively, FA Cup winners, finish in the top 5, it will drop down to 6th place. If the EFL Cup winners finish in the top 5 of the Premier League, or 6 in the event of above, their Conference League playoff place will go to the next highest ranked team that have not qualified for the UEFA competitions in the Premier League. I hope you're following all that, but yeah, it's getting very, very confusing. And should a Premier League club win the Champions League, they'll automatically qualify for the league phase of next season's competition, regardless of their finishing position in the league. So, for example, if Man City finish in 7th, for example, they'll qualify for the Champions League if they go and win it. Should a Premier League club win the Europa League, they will automatically qualify for the league phase of next season's UEFA Champions League, regardless of their finishing position in the league. And if a club win the UEFA Champions League or UEFA Europa League and finish in the top 4, their qualification for the UEFA Champions League through their Conference League, I should say, through their league position is not transferred to another team. So, breathe. But of course, there is these stipulations as well, and I'll let those show on screen for a moment. There's also, though, this question of coefficient, and of course, England could be given another place in the Champions League. So England could get 5 places in the Champions League. And as of today, after Spurs have beaten Hoffenheim, England are actually top of the coefficients rank. But that really depends, on which Spanish teams and German teams really get through. Italy is 2nd at the moment, but I think Spain and Germany are probably, would you agree, Graham, are probably the biggest threats to England not getting 5 places.
Craig?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, that's gone across my head.
Yeah, to be honest, it does me as well.
You could spend the next 25 minutes, hour, 4 hours, 6 hours, 15 hours manipulating all those different results and everything. Forget it, mate. I mean, yes, the Germans are strong and whatever. You cannot prognosticate. You cannot look at results and tell what's going to happen. And I don't blame you guys doing that. You'll spend your hours as fans doing that. As a journalist, I just look the facts in front of me. Go and beat the next team. Go and beat the next team. And if you don't get there, no Bournemouth fan can cry and say it's been a failure, we didn't get into Europe, because no one expects them to get into Europe. You're the smallest club in the Premier League. You're not expected to do that. The very fact that you're fighting with the Man Cities and everybody else is sensational. So after this season, whatever happens, you all Bournemouth fans go home and go, wow, what a season. How fantastic it is. Because the thing that I find as a journalist is that expectations come too high. Eddie Howe went to Newcastle. They were struggling near the bottom. They were in difficulties. He survived. They survived. And then the next season, what was it? He got into the Champions League and then and the League Cup final. Sensational. Then he has another season and it's not so good, and people start doubting him. What absolutely balderdash! Because expectations get so high. And all I'm going to say to you, Bournemouth fans, is enjoy the moment. Don't go to I'm not going to get involved with permutations because it totally goes above my head because I don't know all those facts and figures you've said. But to me, just enjoy the moment. If you get there, fantastic. If you don't get there, every fan in the country from other teams will go, well done, Bournemouth.
Yeah, to be honest, Graham, I've been looking at these and all these permutations. It's just like it confuses the hell out of me.
It's a waste of
Yeah,
space.
it does.
It's a waste of space looking at it, mate. The
Yeah.
fact is Bournemouth are 7th. The fact is they could beat Nottingham Forest at the weekend. They could, go away. They could even shock Liverpool. They are a team that are performing above expectations. And Bournemouth fans should be absolutely proud of their team and proud of themselves because they kept the club alive all those years ago, putting money into cans and everything like that to keep the club alive. And now they're sitting in a stadium watching Premier League football and possibly European football. You can't ask for more than that. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. But Matt, this is an interesting point. The next point that you've made, and let's bring it up on screen quickly. Is the money worth it in the Europa League? Because if we look at the figures there, using this table in conjunction with the average distance a team goes in the competition, the average English team away from the Big Six will get a total revenue of 7 million to 8 million from the Europa League when comparing this to the prize money from the Premier League, which with teams 5th to 10th receiving 135 million to 145 million in the 2021 season. So 4 years ago. And it's only going up and up and up. Both of those figures would look different with ticket sales and TV market pool money. In the Europa League, teams receive TV marketing money at different rates depending on their UEFA coefficients ranking. And using an estimated value for the TV money from the Europa League. So just going into that, of course, Bill Foley, it's a weird one because, of course, it's great to finish as high up in the Premier League as possible. But the Europa League, when we look at the following season and, going on to what the likes of Brighton have done and Wolves have done in the past, where they've got into Europe and prioritised it, their Premier League form has taken a bit of a dent. So is it a case where the Europa League, if we get into that, kind of it's got to take secondary, has it, from a business perspective?
For me, I mean, in terms of you've got to prioritise the bread and butter, in my opinion. That's the league. And this is kind of where Graham touched on earlier about the size of the squads and stuff. For me, I mean, even though it's a dream to be in Europe and it'd be great going to all these different European cities week in, week out and playing, teams in Europe. But for me, it's all about the bread and butter. It's all about staying in being in the Premier League for me. It's when you see how, sometimes Europe has affected teams, playing on a Thursday, then a Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. And I know Europa League sometimes plays Wednesdays now as well, don't they? They kind of split it over days, don't they? So, but even then Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, whichever way you look at it, it's still a lot of games across the season, isn't it? And, when you look at the amount of injuries we've got now, it's, for me, even if we do get into Europe, we've got to prioritise the league, in my opinion. I think the money side of it isn't, the money side of it is a whole different thing. It's a case of the league for me. I mean, obviously the financial rewards are better in the league anyway, but it's all about keeping your Premier League status.
No, most definitely. And there is a little bit about the financial reward as well. But here's a big question. Can the Cherries keep hold of their star players if they qualify or don't qualify for Europe. Graham, I'm going to throw this over to you. There's a lot of people looking at Milos Kerkez, of course. Liverpool's been muted. Real Madrid and Manchester City have been mentioned with Zabani at one point. Semenyo, there's been lots of rumours about him. And of course, Howson as well now. So if we do or don't qualify for Europe, can we really keep hold of these star players?
It all depends on how ambitious Bill Foley is and the board. Now, the board have got to look at their money situation. As I said earlier, Bournemouth don't earn that much during the season. And you get the fair play and all that. They may have to sell one player to give them that little lift to go and buy a couple more players for their squad and whatever. And now we've saw, let's face it, they sold their best striker, didn't they, Solanke in last summer for incredible, what was it, the best fee, wasn't it, the top fee of the summer, 65 million pounds. Now they did that because they bring in the money, they think, well, let's cash in. So they might look at one or two of these players and think, or maybe one, and think, well, if Semenyo is desperately wanted by Liverpool or Tottenham and we can get 40-50 million for him, they might let him go. I can't believe the youngster that's coming from Juventus, 19, they would let him go so early, because the more he plays, the more he gets the experience of Premier League football, he's going to be even bigger fee. Kerkez, I think, is too early for him. Yes, they want him. He's a fantastic defender. I would think they'd probably hold on to him. And, the centre-back, you've got to look at him and go, yeah, he's fantastic. But do they want to? Now, it all depends on the player and the agents. Now, if they think, oh, I want our money now, I want to leave. Now, of course, if Bournemouth qualify for Europe, they might say, oh, I might stay here. Oh, this will be a great another season. But, depending on what the agents are doing behind the scenes. But the fact is, if Bournemouth are doing this well, their top players will be chased. Their top players. Now, listen, there's another conundrum. I hear, we're reading, that Andoni is now being looked at by Spurs. Now, it's not just the players. This is another question I'm going to be asking him tomorrow. It's not just the players. Every week we talk about players, and he said, oh, every week we have another player being listed and everything, and he sort of shrugs it aside and has a little laugh about it. But now we can ask him, well, what about you? Because let's face it, what he's doing for Bournemouth, the top clubs will want him. If Ange leaves Tottenham, they're going to be looking for a really top quality manager who plays good football. Well, he's a prime candidate now. He's going to be in the mix as well. Now, if Andoni leaves, then other players might go, oh, hold on, the future of this club, I'm not quite sure about this. So anything can happen. I mean, you can do all the permutations you want. It all depends what's in the market and what the players are prepared to leave for. So yes, there are doubts on all four of them, but I think probably in my mind, Semenyo is the one that could be the one that leaves.
No, don't say that, Graham. Honestly, he's my favourite. Semenyo, I go on about him all the time, don't I, Matt? So yeah.
Same here. I agree with you. He's a lovely bloke to talk to as well, and I'm hoping to speak to him very soon. He is a lovely bloke. He is great, but he makes things happen. And maybe he's probably ready. I don't want him to leave, but maybe the fees, if you're talking 50, 60 million or whatever, the board may well look at that. Because let's face it, again, they don't make enough money. And these players now cost them a lot of money in wages. And they might be thinking, well, we need to sell one top player every summer.
And one thing I did, because I spoke to Mark McAdam, because there was a rumour, really weird rumour, of course, when Nottingham Forest and Everton got penalised, that Bournemouth were sailing close to the wind. And I think every club got a sniff of that, didn't they? I saw it about Wolves. I saw it about, of course, Man City and Chelsea have been mentioned several times, and it looks like they are going to get penalised, both of them. But there was this rumour, and Mark McAdam said, no, we're absolutely fine. But considering the money that we have spent, both in January and during the summer, how close are we sailing to the winds if we don't make any sales at all? So if Bill Foley says, right, okay, we're not selling, we are going to keep this squad, keep this core squad, and I'm going to put my foot down. How close to the wind are we sailing?
Well, I think Solanke's move got them out of the problem last year. And as I just said, I think if they sell one of these one of these players that are highly thought of, like, you got to look at it and say, well, he may well do it. It's the figures. They can't fall under this situation with the fair play and everything. And they may well have to sell one of their top players. Can you see they've just brought in 2 or 3 youngsters, teenagers?
Yes.
Yeah, they're paid reasonable money, but they're playing. They're bringing them in for the future. Just like Dean. He's a wonderful centre back. Hyson. He's a very mature centre back, and they've brought him in for the future. They brought him in to be selling off probably 3 or 4 years down the line, and so therefore, if they get rid of Semenyo for a lot of money, they can carry on and do very well for themselves. But they've got to look at all the figures. And I'm going to give credit to Bournemouth, because at one stage I thought they were buying mediocre players, and I was quite critical of them. As I said before, they were buying 5'8" midfielders, all the same, couldn't hit a barn door and whatever. Now I look at these players they've brought in and go, well, hold on, guys, you're proving me wrong. They are bringing in quality players that fit into a system. And the manager tells me he has very little dealings with that. He leaves it to the board. He keeps saying, I don't know what's happening. I'm leaving it to the board. And so all credit to them. They're bringing in the players that fit into the system. And you've got to take your hat off to Bournemouth for what they've done, because I was very critical of them. But look at these players now. They're going to be commanding some big fees. I mean, let's face it, as far as I was concerned, Cliver had no idea of the Premier League when he arrived. He was totally out of the system. He didn't know how to play in the high system of Premier League football. It's intense. He couldn't cross a ball. He couldn't do anything. And I'm looking at him going, Jesus, what are they doing signing this guy? And all of a sudden, he's now turning out to be a fantastic player. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to for Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth fans have got to not stretch themselves too far and worry about this and worry about that. Just enjoy the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, it's quite interesting. I want to ask you a little question on this as well, because this is always one made me wonder. Now, of course, the players that we're signing are perfect for Andoni's system now, it appears.
Yep.
Is it a case that Andoni is he identifying the players and saying, look, this player, this player, this player, this player, and then sending it to Frano to actually go and get them? Because our recruitment model has been excellent for so long. It was excellent, under Eddie. It was excellent under Gary O'Neill, excellent under Scott Parker, of course, on different levels. But is it a case that Andoni's picking out these players and his wish list and giving that to Frano? Or is it a case that Frano's actually looking for these players and then offering them to Andoni before the signing's made?
Well, if Andoni's being honest with me at press conferences, and I ask him every time, he's saying he's leaving it to the board. I say, well, what input are you having? He said, I might have a small input, but he's leaving it to the board, as if the board know exactly what he wants and they go and find these players. Now, years ago, I'm an oldie, of course. Years ago, the manager had complete control over it. And the manager would be telling the board who he wanted. And the manager would be giving them 2 or 3 names. And that was it. But it looks like now, director of football, whoever it is, or they're going out there, looking around the world and finding certain players and coming back with all the stats and figures, probably running it past Andoni and say we got a chance for this one, and maybe, but it doesn't look as though the modern day manager has that big bearing on signings. And I'm absolutely sure there are signings that have come into the squad that he knows very little about. And that's the way of the world now. I think it's happening at every club. I think the whole game's changed now. I mean, let's face it, a lot of the clubs are using stats, aren't they? How fast they can run, how far, how many yards. I think Brighton or Brentford have used that system. It's all down with stats and everything like that. And I know many a good a good man who's been out scouting that for years and years and years, saying the game's gone, they're not needed anymore because it's all done with stats. And that's the way the new world is. And I can see, and I don't think I can confirm the fact that Andoni knows all about the players they're after.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. It's always interesting to find out a little bit more of the inner workings, but let's ask a big question, because this has been ongoing for ages, hasn't it? And I'm going to ask you probably first, Matt, but is Iriola better than Howe? Now, I've seen loads of this on X, I've seen it on Facebook, I've seen it on Instagram, I've seen it everywhere, and everybody's talking about this. I've got my own opinion, but Matt, do you want to go first?
Yeah, no worries. For me, this is, fans will always have their own opinions on this, and no one's right, no one's wrong. But for me, they're in two different brackets and two different categories. Eddie is, Bournemouth, isn't he? Youth team, first team, and then into the coaching and management side of the game. And he's the one that built the foundations, really, isn't he? Okay, he had that stint at Burnley, but, obviously came back. And, he's the man that first took us into the Premier League, which, was a really special moment. I always enjoyed Howe's style of play. I thought, the way he implemented his style of play and his man management, and like we had Mark Pugh on the podcast, just before Christmas, and he was massively highly praising Eddie's man management and his coaching style. But it was a different era. It's a different era. So for me, these two, it's hard to say who's better than who, because Iriola's now managing us in a totally different era to when Eddie was, and he's got, Bill Foley as the owner. Eddie had Maxim, but obviously Bill's got more sort of financial power. Iriola's style of play is, a lot more intense, in my opinion, than Eddie's. And I think, and a lot of people at the moment are debating, is this the best squad Bournemouth has ever had? That's another debate as well. So for me to say which one is better out of the two is just too difficult. For me, they're both up there. I think Eddie will always have a soft spot in my heart because, he's been Bournemouth through and through. Coming from, I watched Eddie Howe's debut in 1996 against Hull City on Boxing Day. I think he played right back that day, actually. So I've seen Eddie grow up with the club, but Iriola is really giving us a masterclass at the minute. So, but I can't say who's better. I just can't. I know a lot of fans out there have their opinions, and that's great. But for me, they're both on that same level for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe I'm sitting on the fence too much there, but for me, that's just my opinion, and every fan's entitled to their opinion. I wouldn't say anybody else. If someone says Iriola is better than Howe, then that's their opinion. But for me, it's two different eras for me. It's like you can't compare John Bond to Harry Redknapp
Yeah, exactly.
in some respects. Do you see what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
Both promotion winning managers, but different eras. And it's like these days when people say, is Mourinho a better manager than Brian Clough? Well, different eras, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's my outlook on it anyway.
Graham, you know both of these legends. You know Iriola, you know Eddie Howe. Do you think one's better than the other, or do you think it's based on the circumstances they're in at the moment?
Totally ridiculous question, Craig.
Yeah.
There's only one legend, and that's Eddie Howe. Iraola's been there, 2 years and whatever, and he's doing fantastic. You're not a legend until you win something. You're not a legend until you really make something happen. He's been there 2 years. Eddie was there, 12 years. He took a club from the bootlaces, from the bottom of League Two into the Premier League and stayed there 5 years. He's absolutely sensational for the club. His heart's in the club. He is absolute 100% Bournemouth. Iraola, lovely man, fantastic. He'll probably be dancing away with another club in a year or two and getting big bucks elsewhere. You can't compare the two. Any fans that try and think about it, absolutely ridiculous. There's only one Eddie Howe, and that is it. Now, Iraola was asked the question last Friday at the press conference and said there's been these rumours that people saying you're on a par with Eddie Howe, and he said, do not ask me the question. Absolutely ridiculous. Do not ask me the question. It's absolutely something I can't answer, and I'm not going to answer it because he knows he's nowhere near Eddie Howe's status. Eddie Howe, I know I'm friends of his, and I know we got on very well. But Eddie Howe has done something absolutely wonderful for the Bournemouth Football Club, and no one can take that away from him. Now I know there are people at the club, and I tell you this. There's been times when I've asked for players to talk about Eddie Howe returning to Bournemouth, and I've asked for certain people at the club to talk about Eddie Howe, and they don't want to talk about him. And I just felt, well, why not? He's your legend. He's done a wonderful job, and people didn't want to talk about him. And a couple of years ago, I wasn't given a player. One of the players that played under him and he's now in the coaching staff. They wouldn't give me anyone to talk about Eddie Howe. And I was told, no, we did this last year. We're not going to do another piece on him. And I thought, well, that is absolutely ridiculous. And I just felt that there's a feeling there that he's moved on. Let's forget him. You can't move on and forget him. You just can't forget what he's done for the club. And very few managers have done that. And so there's no comparison as far as I'm concerned. Iraola, a lovely guy, fantastic job, and I hope he goes on and becomes better and better for Bournemouth. But trust me, in a year or two time, he won't be there.
Graham, do you know what? I'm chuffed you've actually said that, because my opinion, Eddie Howe, without Eddie Howe, this football club probably wouldn't exist. This football club could have been relegated into the National League. I know Eddie Mitchell, God rest his soul, turned around and said that, he thought that Bournemouth would have survived. However, all honesty, Eddie Howe, what he's done for this football club, taking us through the leagues. Of course, he went to Burnley, come back. I think it would take something unbelievable to get anywhere near where he's got to. It's two different circumstances, two different eras, and we wouldn't have Iriola without Eddie Howe. That's the simple end of it, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. And you mentioned Eddie Mitchell. Now, the club didn't really want to recognise him. And you probably may know this, I don't know. But when I wasn't given a player to talk about Eddie Howe's return, I think it was last season or the season before last, and I didn't have a story on Eddie Howe's return to Bournemouth, I phoned Eddie Mitchell up. And I got two fantastic stories out of him.
Yeah.
One saying that he and friends have put on £1,000 bet that Eddie Howe will be the next England manager to win the World Cup. That was my back page lead. And then he also said he supports Newcastle now and not Bournemouth because he was banned from the club by the Russian. Now, that gave me a back page lead and a spread. Two good stories. Eddie, Eddie Mitchell, whether you liked him or not, and there were times it was a bit difficult with the media, but he brought Eddie Howe into the club. He spruced up the club. He put a lot of money into the club. He got in the Russian eventually that got rid of him, but he also responsible getting Eddie Howe back to Bournemouth. And Eddie Mitchell deserves a lot for what he did. And yet the club wanted to just sort of brush him out of their history. And I do know that when he died, they put very little in the programme or whatever about his death. And it was very naughty. And I feel that, Eddie Mitchell deserves more praise than what he got. However, no one can take away the fact that Eddie Howe has been the saviour of Bournemouth because the way they played their football, backed by Eddie Mitchell and then by the Russian, and you can't take that away. So you cannot even look at Andoni and say there's a comparison.
No, and I echo, and I know, I've spoken to Eddie Mitchell, of course, years ago. I knew Eddie quite well. He's been on this show as well. I spoke to him in quite some depth. And I think, although he kind of, in a way, Matt, didn't he? He kind of brushed it off as that I was banned by the club. I could tell deep down it really, really, really hurt him as a person.
Yeah, and no, I agree with what Graham's just said there. He, for me, he came in at a time and stabilised the club, and he brought Maxim in, and without Eddie Mitchell's input at the time, that's still part of the foundations that's happened throughout the years, and when we had him on here, it was great to have him on and have his his opinion, and it's shame that there wasn't a little bit more about him in like the match day program and things like that, because he is part of the history. It's as simple as that. And out of all the owners throughout the history, the club, he was one of the ones that had a business head and stabilized the club. So yeah,
from my perspective, I think it was bloody disgusting that the club didn't make a lot more of and a lot more of a memorial for Eddie Mitchell, considering what he done for this football club, and he stabilised it. And of course, Eddie Howe, I personally am of the thought, when we build this new stadium that's being talked about, I believe that a statue should be built for Eddie Howe.
Yeah, absolutely.
We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for if it wasn't for Eddie Howe, we wouldn't be here. But Graham, thank you so much for coming on the show, and of course, do tell us a little bit more about your book and, of course, your audio book as well that's coming.
Well, yes, I'm celebrating 50 years on the sporting front line. I've done it since 1973. I've got a lot of stories to tell, but my book is not just me telling my stories. It's like a chat show. I've got all the dignitaries, all the sporting heroes talking to me. I've got it all taped. It's on an audio show. Let's just say it's like a Graham Norton, but not a Graham Norton. It's a sporting version of Graham Norton, where he sits down with the celebrities and has a good laugh. I have a good laugh, all these celebrities, and I'm very lucky. I've got the likes of Nigel Mansell. He's done the foreword to the book, and you can hear him on my audio book. And I've got Eddie Howe on there. I've got Kevin Keegan, I've got Steve Davis, and I've got Jimmy White and Dennis Taylor, Barry Hearn, Matt Letizia. I've got about 20. I've also got Nathan Ake is on there. I interviewed him for a podcast show I was doing with Nigel Spackman 3 or 4 years ago, and I've got that interview on there as well, along with others. So it's an intriguing look at my career, 50 years. I wrote the book really just for my kids, my children, my daughters and grandchildren could have something, because they kept telling me, Dad, Dad, write a book. You've got so many stories to tell. And I have. And I've put it. But the fact is, it's not about me. It's my career, but it's all about my relationship with the celebrities and their stories. You've got the Black Ball final, the snooker final, the greatest final of all time. And Steve Davis has given me a belting story on that. You've got Wimbledon beating Liverpool. In the FA Cup, I've got Laurie Sanchez talking about his winning goal and our relationship and everything like that. Matt Letizia talks about the biggest con in football when this guy Ali Dyer replaced him. Well, these are all my stories, And I was there the day Matt told me that he'd been sacked by Sky. So, Kevin Keegan talks about Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe talks about England for the first time for me. So there's a lot in there for sporting fans, and Nigel Mansell tells me about how he was betrayed by the sport, not only in Formula One but IndyCar racing. That's the first. So people opening up to me because I've known them for a long time. A lot of them are friends, and I think it'll be good value. The audiobook should be out any day now. I'm working on it with new publishers because my publisher went bankrupt on Christmas Eve. And I'm now finding another publisher to print the book that should be out hopefully in the next few weeks. But the audiobook should be out very soon. And I think you'll enjoy it, sporting fans.
Yep, definitely. Yep. And do go get that audiobook. It's in the description below as well. But Graham, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. And before we finish, we was going to give you a chance to guess the cherry. Now, of course, previously I ran through it. Normally Matt reads that. So Matt, do you want to read the clues this time round? Because I did it the wrong way round. Sorry, mate.
No, I'll let you go. Get it right this time.
All right. I'll get it
You've
right.
got a chance to redeem yourself.
All right, no problem. So this cherry was born in Newcastle under Lyme in 1945. He played under great Stanley Matthews at Port Vale, but supported Stoke City. Made his name at Gillingham, signed for Cherries in 1970 and went on to play 126 times, scoring 8 times. Known to have turned down Spurs to play for John Bond at Norwich, conceded a penalty in the 1975 League Cup final by handling the ball, and as manager of Man City, he gave Man United a hammer by overseeing a 5-1 victory. Who is he?
He's on the tip of my tongue. I'm no Bournemouth fan, so it'd be very difficult for me to say. But this man I've interviewed, I'm absolutely sure. I interviewed him at Bournemouth and I interviewed him at Norwich, and I'm just trying to find out in my mind if I can just come to a name, and I'm struggling. It's M. M is in my mind. M, but I might have to hand it over to you guys and other people because I just can't get it in my mind who it is.
Go on,
and
then,
if
Matt.
I was anywhere near it, Mel Machin. There's 2 M's.
Yeah.
I was close. That was the man I was thinking of, and I just couldn't come to his name. And the very fact that I've said M, the very fact that I was thinking of him is sensational because I haven't got a great memory and I'm not a Bournemouth fan. But yeah, I would have got it if I could have remembered his name.
No problem. We'll give you that one, Graham. Not to worry.
Give me half a point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Graham. It's been a real pleasure.
It has,
and
boys.
all the very best for the book. And no doubt we'll speak again very soon as well.
Thank you. Been a pleasure to be on the show.
Not a problem at all. And everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining me, Matt and Graham today. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell button. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever, do come over to our YouTube channel as well, because you can watch the show as well, so you can see the visual version. But until the next one, up the cherries. We'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us.
Talksport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the Talksport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search Talksport Fan Network.